He was the face of honor in a time of chaos, the voice of justice when few dared to speak. But behind the stoic eyes of Gregory Peck, Hollywood's ultimate moral compass was a secret so intimate he kept it hidden for nearly half a century. It wasn't an award, a role, or even a tragedy that haunted him the most. It was a woman. And not just any woman, one of the most iconic actresses the world has ever known. At 87, long after the lights faded and the applause died down, Gregory finally broke his silence. And what he revealed, it changed everything we thought we knew about the man behind Atticus Finch. But to understand why this confession matters, you need to know the full story. The fame, the heartbreak, the quiet pain he carried behind the scenes, and the woman he never stopped loving. Before he was Hollywood royalty, Eldred Gregory Peck was just a lanky kid from La Jolla, California. His childhood wasn't the glossy, golden age fantasy people imagine it was marked by quiet instability. His parents divorced when he was just 5 years old. Raised mostly by his grandmother, Gregory learned early on how to carry himself with dignity, even when the world around him was unpredictable. He didn't grow up dreaming of movie sets or stardom. In fact, he was on a path to medicine studying pre-med at UC Berkeley. But something shifted. Maybe it was the way people responded when he read poetry aloud. Maybe it was the way the stage offered structure in a life that had so little of it. Whatever it was, by the time he transferred to the neighborhood playhouse in New York City, Gregory wasn't just chasing a career, he was chasing purpose. And Hollywood noticed. Tall, magnetic, and impossibly sincere, Gregory Peck arrived on the scene during World War I, when audiences were desperate for heroes who looked and sounded like they believed in something. He wasn't rugged like Bogart or dangerous like Brando. Peck brought something else: integrity. And yet, even as he rose through the ranks, earning 5 Oscar nominations in his first 7 years there, was still a part of him the public never saw. A longing that no spotlight could reach. A connection forged in secrecy, with a woman whose fame rivaled his own. But we'll get to her. First, Gregory Peck would have to become the face of post-war morality and pay the price for it. By the mid-1940s, Gregory Peck wasn't just a promising actor, he was becoming a fixture. His breakout came in 1944's The Keys of the Kingdom, where he played a humble priest in China. It was his first Oscar nomination, and it set the tone. Peck didn't play characters who barked or brawled, he played men who stood firm, quietly. But Hollywood doesn't hand out longevity for good intentions. What made Peck a legend was the impossible balance he struck: strength without cruelty, conviction without arrogance, power without noise. He could hold a frame just by being. Then came Gentleman's Agreement, 1947. It was risky. He played a journalist pretending to be Jewish to expose anti-Semitism in post-war America, a bold choice in a town that usually preferred its politics soft and its stakes softer. But Peck didn't flinch. The film won Best Picture. Peck became more than a matinee idol, he became relevant. And then, Roman Holiday, 1953. Audrey Hepburn's debut, sure. But watch it again. Watch the way Peck steps back, lets her light shine, and somehow makes the story better by doing less. That takes confidence. That takes generosity. But nothing would define him like To Kill a Mockingbird, 1962. As Atticus Finch, Peck became the conscience of a nation. Not just because of what the character stood for, but because Gregory Peck already carried that weight. He didn't have to act like a decent man, he was one. The Academy finally agreed. He won his only Oscar. And for many, it wasn't just a performance, it was a blueprint for manhood. But here's the truth they didn't tell you. Playing heroes on screen? That was easy. Off-screen, Peck was navigating guilt, grief, a troubled marriage, and a private connection to someone the press would have devoured if they ever found out. And they almost did. To the world, Gregory Peck had it all: a rock-solid career, a beautiful wife, and a reputation as Hollywood's moral compass. But every idol casts a shadow, and Peck's was deeper than most ever knew. He married Greta Kukkonen in 1942. A Finnish-born woman, elegant and privatesh, supported him during his hungry years and bore him 3 sons. On paper, it was picture perfect. But under the surface, cracks were forming. Fame has a way of testing devotion. So does distance. So does loneliness. And then came the woman whose name he never intended to say out loud, Greta Garbo. She was the definition of Hollywood mystery reclusive, ethereal, a star who disappeared at the height of her fame. No interviews, no autographs, no explanations. And yet, when their paths crossed in the late 1940s, something unspoken passed between them. Rumors swirled quietly, whispered in backlots and behind studio doors. Long walks through Central Park, hours behind closed doors in European hotels, a chemistry too electric to ignore. He was drawn to her stillness, she to his strength. They were opposites, but they saw each other. Peck denied it for years, but in a rare moment of candor decades later, he admitted, "Yes, I was in love with her, but it was a love that couldn't survive the world watching. It wasn't just an affair, it was a collision of identities, of guilt, of longing for a life that couldn't exist under the Klieg lights." The affair didn't end his marriage right away. That would come later. But it left a mark of fracture in his carefully composed image. And while the tabloids never caught the full story, those close to him say, Garbo haunted him. She was the great what if. He was her last great love. And neither of them ever spoke of it again. By the 1970s, Gregory Peck had become more than an actor. He was an institution and elder statesman of the screen, revered, dignified, untouchable. But grief has no respect for legend. In 1975, his oldest son, Jonathan, was found dead in his home. A self-inflicted gunshot wound. He was just 30 years old. Jonathan had been bright, charismatic, full of promise. A former television journalist, fluent in several languages, he had his father's gravitas and his mother's restraint. But he also carried a weight no one could fully understand. Depression, quietly devastating, had stalked him for years, and in the end, it caught him. Gregory was shattered. The news didn't make screaming tabloid headlines. Peck, ever the guardian of his privacy, made sure of that. But those who knew him say he was never the same. He walked heavier, one friend said, like something inside him had been broken and stayed broken. He withdrew. Roles slowed. Speeches grew more somber. He began speaking publicly about suicide prevention, mental health, and the pain of silence. Not as an actor, but as a father who would never stop asking, what more could I have done? And yet, he carried on. Because that's what men of his era did. He loved harder, held his remaining children closer, and when he spoke of Jonathan, it was always with a trembling kind of reverence, like saying his name was both a prayer and a penance. This wasn't a plot twist in a Hollywood script. This was real loss, deep, permanent, and unresolved. Gregory Peck, the icon, the leading man, the moral compass, was now something even more human. A father in mourning. If his roles gave him greatness, she gave him gravity. Veronique Pisani was unlike anyone Gregory Peck had ever met. Born in Paris, educated, elegant, a former journalist with Le Monde, she wasn't impressed by Hollywood, nor enamored with the man the world saw on screen. She wanted to know the man behind the mid-hand that, more than anything, pulled Gregory toward her. They met in 1953, just before he flew to Italy to film Roman Holiday. At the time, he was still married to his first wife, Greta. But something shifted. He would later admit, I fell for Veronique the moment I met her. By 1955, he was divorced. And in December of that same year, he and Veronique were married. The world raised eyebrows. Gossip columns whispered. But Gregory didn't care. For the first time, he wasn't chasing a role or an image. He was chasing peace. And Veronique gave it to him. She was fiercely intelligent, politically sharp, and deeply private qualities Gregory admired and needed. She became his confidant, his anchor, and often, his quiet moral compass. While others saw Peck as the embodiment of American virtue, she knew the man who wrestled with guilt, who mourned in silence, who doubted himself after the cameras stopped rolling. She stood by him through the storms. Jonathan's death. Career lulls. scandals, and the slow fade of fame. Together, they had 2 children. And together, they built a life away from the spotlight, traveling, reading, discussing world affairs over dinner, hosting salons of intellects and artists rather than Hollywood stars. In an industry of fleeting love stories, theirs was enduring, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. In the end, when Gregory's health began to fail, it was Veronique who cared for him day in, day out. And when he died in 2003, after nearly 50 years of marriage, she was at his side. No scripts, no spotlights, just her hand in his. The legend had many co-stars, but only one true leading lady. In the twilight of his life, Gregory Peck moved with the quiet dignity of a man who had lived deeply loved, lost, endured. The booming voice had softened, the iconic jawline had weathered, but the eyes still carried that impossible mix of sorrow and strength. He largely stepped back from the spotlight in the 1990s, appearing only occasionally in honorary Oscar here, a heartfelt tribute there. He spent his days reading voraciously, traveling with Veronique, and hosting intimate evenings at their Los Angeles home, where conversation ranged from politics to poetry. But there was something else, something he rarely spoke about. In those final years, friends noticed a weight behind his smile, a wistfulness when he spoke of family, and a haunting silence whenever Jonathan's name came up. What most didn't know was that Gregory never stopped carrying the guilt. He blamed himself not overtly, but subtly, in the way only a grieving father can. Jonathan had struggled with mental health for years, and though Gregory tried therapy, treatment, unconditional love, he often asked himself, "Did I do enough? Was I too consumed with being everyone's hero that I forgot to be his?" It was a question no accolade could answer. Those who were close to him say he kept a locked drawer in his study filled with letters from Jonathan. Some happy, some pleading, some barely legible through grief. Veronique said he'd sometimes sit alone in that room for hours, not crying, just remembering. Gregory never wanted the world to see this part of him. The broken part. The father who failed. The man who couldn't save his son. He once told a friend, "People look at me and see Atticus Finch, but I'm not him. I just tried to be." In June 2003, at the age of 87, Gregory passed away quietly in his sleep, with Veronique holding his hand. There were headlines, tributes, retrospectives. Hollywood mourned a giant. But the man himself had left long before, piece by piece, moment by moment, carved out by grief, held together by grace. He gave the world characters to believe in, but the most powerful role he ever played was the one he never let anyone see. Gregory Peck didn't just leave behind a resume of legendary performances, he left a blueprint for what integrity in the spotlight could look like. Long after his voice stopped echoing through sound stages, his presence remains in the moral compass of Atticus Finch, the quiet resistance of Father Chisholm, the solemn justice of General MacArthur. These weren't just roles, they were extensions of something deeper inside him, a man who believed character mattered even off camera. To this day, young actors cite him as the gold standard not because he was the loudest or flashiest, but because he showed that strength could be gentle and masculinity could hold space for empathy. His films are still taught in schools, still dissected in film classes, still watched by generations who weren't even born when they were made, because truth the kind Peck embodied doesn't age. But maybe Gregory Peck's truest legacy isn't found in film reels or award speeches. It's in the way he made people feel. A man of contradictions, stoic yet sensitive, adored by millions yet haunted in private, he reminded us that even legends are human, that grief and grace can coexist, that trying to be good still matters, even when you fall short. His name may be etched into Hollywood history, but it's his humanity that echoes longest. Gregory once said, "Tough times don't last, tough people do." But maybe he had it backward. Because Gregory Peck didn't last forever. But the goodness he stood for? That's eternal. So who was Gregory Peck? He was the silver screen's quiet moral giant, but also a man who wrestled with loss, mistakes, and the burden of a flawless image. He gave us heroes who stood up when it counted, and off camera, he tried to do the same. He spoke out against injustice. He opened his heart after it had been shattered. He searched for meaning in a world that often seemed to demand masks. In the end, Gregory Peck was never trying to be perfect. He was trying to be good. And maybe that's what made him unforgettable. Because long after the curtain fell, after the flashbulbs stopped, after the last reel spun out, Gregory Peck remained what so few stars ever do: human, grounded, honest, unshakably real. So the next time you hear that measured voice, or see that impossibly tall figure standing for what's right, remember, you're not just watching a character. You're witnessing a man who lived what he believed. And in a world that changes faster than we can blink, maybe Gregory Peck is exactly the kind of legend we still need.